Welcome to theme 10 of participatory fluency. This is reference, context, and delivery. We're going to talk about a few themes that are related to language transitions, language usage, especially in common situations and situations that you might experience more broadly speaking as a person who's seeking interaction and seeking real-life conversations instead of writing texts and answering formal emails and things that you be likely to find in a company environment in informal situations relating to your boss, relating to your work, and relating to academic purposes. You'll find in this theme references to daily life and the way that people communicate more naturally. So the first thing to talk about is delivery, but just to stress the importance, the way you deliver a message is the way that people will perceive your text and your speech. It's very normal for people to text each other, to use text, and this was transformed into a verb to call the act of sending a text to text, but today you just say that you're talking to someone and you mean you're texting them. You're talking via text on a messaging app, and so texting has become very common, but so have the forms of language that are involved in texting. So for example, if you want to say something like I love you, you might say the letters I, L, Y, and the person will understand that you're abbreviating I love you. This, along with many, believe me, many other forms of abbreviations and things that are inherent to the web, have become more and more common in recent years and have been reinvented in a scale that is unprecedented. Now, it's important to talk about how avoiding certain things is a good idea in some places and situations, but also to know how to use them will make you more effective depending on who you want to talk to and what you want to talk about. If you're having a serious conversation, maybe don't abbreviate things because you're trying to have serious conversations. So the fact that you're not abbreviating your speech makes you be perceived as someone who is talking seriously. So when you're breaking up with someone, you don't say ILY, but we need to break up. You will say I love you, but we need to break up. Of course, we don't want to imagine this kind of situation, but it's just an example of how the seriousness of the situation requires you to abandon the tendency of abbreviation to choose a more formal approach, a more conventional approach, more common, not so common, but because it's been deviated, but a more conventional approach to communicating. Now, when I talk about context and reference, it's important to mention that reference can be many things. Reference can be, for example, the things that we say when we locate people in our text or piece that we're writing. If we write a post on social media, it's essential that you ask a few questions. For example, why, where, when, how, who, and these things will be the references of your text. to identify these things will be essential for you to understand what the text is talking about. There are a few examples like this in the course book, and I ask you to pay attention to them, and if you have any questions, just ask your teacher. Now, one of the things that will be very common will be to say that in an internet comment you don't know who is talking, and because this is an anonymous person, you don't know who they are. In this particular situation, it's important to rely on identification cues and to go on a person's profile to see who they say they are. So somebody leaves you a comment. If you say, for example, that the United States is the best country in the world, and somebody replies to you and says, "Who says that?" Who gives you a reference? The person is implying that people may have different kinds of opinions. Who says that? So who is a very important word in this context. But it's also equally important to say who is questioning that. Who is replying like that? So it's important to keep in mind that you can go through an analysis process to see who is this person who is leaving you a comment. And in one of the sections that we have in the course book, we talk about the fact of sending, commenting, and then selling and buying, which is in another context. When we send messages and we comment, we are talking about a complex kind of situation where we are exposing ourselves, our identities, who we are, and we are vulnerable to people looking at what we've said in the past, in case we have a public profile on the internet, and we are vulnerable to what people may have to say. Public people also have this kind of thing, whether they're on social media or not. If you're a person on TV, for example, who doesn't have a social media profile, you're going to be liable for comments of this kind, like, what this guy is saying, I don't agree with it because I think this is not an honest approach. I think something different is happening. I think what we should talk about is this, not that. And so you give your opinion, and this is actually a very polite way of putting things. People will eventually or promptly start attacking you based on something that you've said that could be serious. Your tone could be serious, but given the distance, and this is why it's important to talk about context, given the distance, it's very easy for you or any person to deviate from formal to informal, from academic to internet based at random, and so this will depend and pass through the lens of delivery. How do you deliver the message? Is the message effective? If somebody's saying, well, studies show that not wearing masks will cause the population to absorb the disease of COVID-19 more easily and get immunity. This was a discussion that was very much in vogue when we had the pandemic starting in 2019 and in the end of 2019 and that went on for a few years. And some people say that we are still on alert for that, especially in the case of long COVID. It's important to get informed, but there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of conflictuous information in a very non-typical environment for people who were not prepared to deal with this kind of controversy and conflictuous messages. So in this case, there's a person who's talking from a formal context, but the reactions can be very different. The reactions can be, what are you talking about? Something like that, you know? You don't know anything. Not to say a bad word here, but you don't know anything. On the student's book we actually cover some of the bad words that we can use in this case, but I don't want to post it on YouTube. But there are forms that you can use to replace you don't know anything. The word anything could be easily replaced by a popularly used expression that means you don't know, you know nothing. You don't know anything. You know nothing. So it's important to keep in mind that in this case, the delivery is important. So it's important for you to be consistent in your adversarian. Being an adversary is important for you. It's important for you to be on the other side and say who you are in this argument, but it's equally important to contextualize the discussion that you're having and perceptions that other people may have. If a lot of people give you likes, that means that probably a lot of people liked your comment, not necessarily that they like you. They're not going to start following you because of a comment, but sometimes this happens. And this is a situation that is very common in the social media landscape. If you don't talk about social media, we're going to be discussing things that we've seen in traditional media like magazines and newspapers, and so these questions of why, where, when, who, which, whose, and even words that make reference to previously mentioned or later mentioned parts of the text will be important, like moreover, furthermore, however, despite, and those words will be important for you to create vocabulary good enough to understand the text in all of its devices and different kinds of messages. I'll see you on the next round.